Victorian authorities have extreme concerns after the emergence of a mystery COVID-19 case who is a healthcare worker at an aged care facility. Acting Premier says the health authorities are yet to determine the source of 2 of the 5 new locally acquired COVID cases overnight. Reporter Leanne Wong joins us now from Melbourne. Hi Leanne, very concerning for authorities there. What about this case in aged care?
That's right, Lorna. This case is extremely concerning simply because it is, as you mentioned, a mystery case, meaning authorities have yet to figure out exactly how this worker contracted the virus, and it could potentially suggest that there's broader transmission of the virus in the community. Now, what we do know is that this worker worked at the Care Maidstone aged care facility in Melbourne's northwest on Wednesday and Thursday of last week while they were infectious. However, they didn't display any symptoms at the time. Now, authorities have praised this worker because they said that this worker promptly got tested on Friday, so just the day after the minute they started displaying symptoms, and they've praised this woman for her fast acting. Now, we do know as well that this worker has received their first dose of the COVID vaccine. It's worth noting that Care Maidstone is a private aged care facility and falls under the Commonwealth Government's vaccine rollout. And Testing Commander Jerome Wong said today that so far only half of its residents, as well as a third of its staff members, have been vaccinated so far. Jerome Wong also said that this is a case of extreme concern, particularly as we know how vulnerable people are in aged care, and especially considering what happened in Victoria's lockdown last year, its second lockdown, where we saw those cases get into the aged care facilities and resulted in hundreds of deaths. Let's listen to what Mr. Wong had to say earlier today.
We learned about this positive case late last night. Within the hour, we had the operational command team set up and running across a whole number of agencies to establish the situation, to put controls in place within that particular aged care facility, and to surge the additional testing work that we're doing right now. This particular aged care facility has gone into further lockdown. Residents have been confined to their rooms, and isolated immediately. Staff have upgraded now to Tier 3 PPE. Staff coating, of course, was already in place. That again has been stepped up. And my thanks to all the staff who are at this site doing the really important work to establish where else this virus may have circulated in that particular facility. We are doing on-site testing there, of course, this morning, today, during the course of the day for both staff and residents. It'll be particularly priority for us to identify any potential exposures that the staff member has had within the facility, and of course any exposures the staff member may have had in the wider community. I can confirm that this facility has been on the Commonwealth programme for vaccination. Over half of the residents have been vaccinated. We believe about a third of the staff have been vaccinated. This individual positive case member has had one vaccination, has had her first vaccination dose.
So we know that there are 5 new cases overnight, Yvonne. What can you tell us about any of the others?
That's right. So there are 2 mystery cases, as you mentioned earlier. And of those remaining 3 cases, well, one of them is linked to the City of Whittlesea cluster. Authorities say that they were a customer at a Telstra store in South Melbourne, which was already listed as an exposure site, which is how this active case found out that and went and got tested. So they're currently isolating. The remaining 2 cases, well, they're contacts of known cases and linked to the cluster in Port Melbourne, which is that Stratton Finance cluster, that financial firm, which has now surpassed more than a dozen positive coronavirus cases. And in total, authorities say that there are now 4,000 primary close contacts here in Victoria, and of those, more than 3,000 have already returned a negative result, but still plenty of results still pending and should be returning soon.
Lots of work to be done, Leanne. The government announced a new support package during that news conferences for businesses who are obviously doing it tough in the lockdown. What did they say?
That's exactly right. So Victoria's business industry has been calling for a number of days now for additional financial support to be provided to local businesses. So this $250 million support package will provide funding for up to 90,000 small and medium-sized businesses, as well as sole traders. There are 3 initiatives as part of this package. So there's a $2,500 grant for businesses that have been directly affected by the lockdowns. That includes restaurants and bars, non-essential retailers, accommodation providers, so anyone who's had to shut their doors because of this lockdown, as well as $3,500 grants for businesses with eligible food certificates and liquor licences. There's also a final $20 million million that's been allocated for Victoria's events industry. Now, during this announcement, Victoria's acting Premier James Merlino, as well as Treasurer Tim Pallas, really didn't hold back in their criticism of the federal government. They say that it's a disgrace that the Commonwealth didn't pitch in any extra financial support to Victorian businesses. Let's take a listen to what the acting Premier had to say.
It's a big support package, the best that we can deliver. It goes to not only general businesses, hospitality, events organisers, but the fact that the federal government one day say they want to work hand in glove with the Victorian government in supporting Victorians, yet when we most need their support, the answer from the Prime Minister and the Treasurer is no. That is just, it is beyond disappointing, and it's why the Treasurer is so angry. Every Victorian business should be angry. We are doing our best.
So some pretty fiery words there from the acting Premier, as well as plenty of more cases of concern as Victoria continues its third day under lockdown.
Leanne Wong in Melbourne, thanks very much for that. As Leanne mentioned, the state government has delivered a scathing assessment of the Morrison government's financial assistance in the circuit breaker lockdown. Let's get the details from Parliament House on the political reaction to this. Emily joins us from there. The Victorian Treasurer wasn't pulling any punches in his criticism, was he?
That's right, Lorna. So we've heard from Tim Pallas, the Victorian Treasurer, James Merlino, the acting Premier in Victoria, and they say that they are not just angry, that they're disappointed that the federal government talks up a big game, that it says that it wants to work in partnership with the states, but it's not pulling its weight, that the federal government says it's working hand in glove, but won't put its hand in its pocket. Here's Tim Pallas earlier this morning.
4 to 5 times over the last 3 or 4 days, I've had conversations with the Federal Treasurer urging them to make some contribution. Even got to the point where I said, even make it a piecemeal one so that we can pretend that you're doing something tangible when in your intent and in your efforts you're not.
Pretty upset about it, wasn't he? Has the federal government indicated it will provide any relief?
Lorna, what the federal government is saying that it's already provided about $40 billion in support to Victoria alone. Now, we had Dan Tehan on the Insiders program this morning. He said that Victorian workers affected by this fourth lockdown should be going into their local Centrelink offices where they might be eligible for a support payment. Now, we've had a look online. The Services Australia website suggests that unless you've been ordered into quarantine or into self-isolation or caring for someone in that situation, you're unlikely to be eligible. Michael McCormack, who's acting Prime Minister at the moment, spoke in Sydney today. Here's what he had to say.
Well, at the moment, the conditions are, as far as assistance are concerned, are the same as what they were prior to this lockdown. But we'll see how long the lockdown goes. Hopefully it will end on Thursday, but any assistance that anybody was receiving before the lockdown they're still eligible to get now.
Now, of course, Victoria's lockdown is expected to end at 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, a week after it started. Michael McCormack says that the federal government will keep in touch with their Victorian counterparts.
Emily Baker live for us in Canberra. Thank you.